All right, welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. And today is a very special one. And we got not one, not two, but three people here besides myself that are going to rank these albums of none other than Mr. Peter Gabriel, the man who just played
Mm.
Buffalo back in November here. And so let's get a little introduction here to Mr. Peter Gabriel. I'm going to have everybody go around the horn and just kind of mention like how you first heard about him or how you got into him or your first album you bought by him, however you want to bring it up. We'll start with David.
Oh yeah, the first album I ever got was So, probably when I was like 12 or 13. So, and then I'm a big Genesis fan, obviously. So I always, I like both him and Phil, but I always geared towards more of the prog side. So Peter Gabriel was always my favorite.
Okay. Tom.
When I was in high school, I had a guy that I went to high school with, Tim Simpson. Not that it matters, but he was the one that kind of originally turned me on to Peter Gabriel. We were all listening to Genesis and everything when I was in high school, and I was able to see him on the Security tour. So, and I think MTV had a lot to do with my initial introduction to Gabriel, especially that Shock the Monkey video and stuff like that. So probably around that area, definitely post Genesis, but and early solo stuff. But yeah, and I worked when I was a dishwasher at a place called Howard Johnson's. We used to listen to Peter Gabriel while we washed the dishes because there was the guy that the older dishwasher was Peter Gabriel fan. So I got to have some good quality Peter Gabriel listening time. That's particularly the album Plays Live.
Nice, nice. Yeah, for me, I was one of these people who had a brother who just loved Genesis and he loved Peter Gabriel. So he played basically Peter Gabriel or Genesis or Phil Collins like nonstop all the time. He would just play them all the time, and I had to share a room with him. So you can only imagine what that was like. So
Yeah.
obviously, I pretty much knew the catalog inside and out from that. But I think the first album I actually bought was So myself. I still don't own Security for some strange reason, but I've definitely gone back and got pretty much the rest of the catalog. Got to see him now. That was my third time seeing him this past November there at the arena. But yeah, first show I saw him was on the Us tour, which was up in Toronto at the Sky Dome. It was phenomenal. That was still probably to this day it's my favorite show of his. So um, yeah, just sometimes the brother picked good music. Some of his other stuff you just want to choke him down, but not for Gabriel. Yeah, yeah, that was a good one. What about you, Davey?
Unfortunately, I've never seen him live, much to my chagrin. I knew the radio hits in the early 80s when they were playing Shock the Monkey and Games Without Frontiers. I remember that video. I think I first saw it on Casey Kasem's show, Top 40 show that used to run on the weekends about 12 noon. And the first album I bought, like most of you guys said, was So, because I fell in love with the song on it, but I'll get to that later.
Okay. All right, sounds good. So now that you got a little introduction, like where we all each came into the Peter Gabriel music here, we're gonna go ahead and start ranking the studio albums. We're ranking eight of them, the main eight studio albums that he made that are considered regular studio albums. We did not include Scratch My Back or New Blood. So we're basically he's got a lot of Peter Gabriels, but they all got also known as many different albums. So obviously, when we go through here, we'll designate which one we're mentioning as we speak here, and we're going to kick it off with our number eight, and the man who usually leads us off here will be none other than Mr. David Hens. What's your number eight?
All right, yeah, my number 8 is Up from 2002. I didn't get this album right when it came out. I got it maybe like probably 5 years ago, so I haven't really had as much time with it as I would have had I gotten it initially. But I mean, for me, I think it's the first half is really strong, and then it kind of wanes with the back half of the album. Like Darkness, Growing Up, and Sky Blue, I think he starts the album off really strong. He's writing a lot about death and like the basically the life cycle from birth to death. There's a lot of like the lyrical content of this album, which it's always interesting. The Barry Williams Show was the single off the album, and it's kind of hokey when you look back on it now. But he was trying to go for some kind of like social commentary about reality television and things like that, which it's interesting, but it's kind of like he was trying a little too hard. So yeah, I think if I go back and listen to this album again a few more times through, I might grow on me a little bit. But for now, what I'll say about his catalog overall is there's really nothing that's truly terrible. I mean, he's one of my favorite artists of all time. I like all the albums, but just some more than others. And so, I mean, something has to be a number 8, and this is it for me. So,
All right, very good. Tom?
Yeah, I almost have nothing to add. Same same album for 8th. It's funny, we haven't done this in a while, Mr. Hens. I have to distinguish my Daves now, but we tend to lean together in terms of the ranking. But yeah, I agree. It's Gabriel is one of those artists that on some level really frustrates me as a music consumer, because he comes out of the box and he pounds out these great records, and then he just drags his feet for the rest of his career. And maybe it's a continuity thing. Maybe it's because it was CD era where he had to put out a little bit more material than some of the stronger albums in terms of, I think a record, unless you're really going for a double, you probably shouldn't have a double unless you have a double's worth of strong material. And this one, I don't know. I'm with you, David. I don't hate it. It's not a bad album. It's not, like the clunker of the catalog. It just doesn't have the highest highs and the as high as some of the other ones. It definitely doesn't have the consistency. It's a little on the dark side.
All right, so my number 8 is the same, Up.
Wow. Holy mackerel.
2002. Yeah. It actually made number 8 on the charts, surprisingly. Very surprised. Actually, I'm yeah, 8 on the charts. I was surprised. Or was it 9? Number 9. I'm sorry.
Number 9.
Yeah, but I knew I was right, 8 or 9. But 338,000 albums. It's like what, about a fourth of what he sold from us, basically. But that's about the time, 2002 already. Then CDs we were starting to get on the way out, unfortunately. Yeah, but this is one album that I never Security I mentioned earlier on. I never bought this one either, so I don't actually own this one either. But nothing stands out on me really on this album. Like all of his other albums, there's a couple songs, no matter what, that's just stand out. This one, if I had to pick 2 songs that I would say that are better than the rest, I would say the opening track, Darkness, and then More Than This. But I don't know, they all just seem to they're all like in the same range. Not one is like really, really bad. Not one is really, really, they're just all average songs. And that's where it ends up for me, that's why, because all the other albums that he has at least 2, 3, sometimes 4, 5, better songs on there. So it just, but having said all that, like David said, not a bad album. It's just one that you can only listen to so many albums, and this is one I just wouldn't really gravitate to. So that's my take on it. What do you got there, Mr. Cretin?
We're all in agreement, and I knew we would all have this at the bottom. I really had a feeling about it. Up from 2002, it reached number 11 on the UK chart, which was not good for him. And like you said, Joey, number 9 in America. It's certified silver in the UK, did not certify here at all. It was produced by Peter Gabriel, Stephen Hague, who's known for working with OMD and New Order, and Steve Osborne, who worked with Aha, the B-52s, and Suede. It came out 10 years after his prior album, which is way too long of a wait. It makes Def Leppard in Boston look like they release albums all the time. And it took nearly 6 years of studio time to make this record. And I just feel it meanders. It's very mellow, it's low key, it's ambient. It has his usual guys on it. I want to give props to the musicians because they're all great. Tony Levin on bass, David Rhodes on guitar, and if I'm pronouncing his name right, the drummer Manu Katché. And it's got a lot of guests on it, but it's very low key and it just doesn't go anywhere. The only song I really like that I gravitate to is the Barry Williams Show, which was the single, which did
Wow.
okay on rock radio, and it had a cool video, but I don't know. Instead of calling it up, I always thought he should have called it down or downer because it's just low key. It's not bad. It's not a terrible record. It's just my least favorite out of his catalog. He's innovative. He's great, but it's got to go somewhere, like you guys said. So number 8 it is for Up.
All right. That's going to take us over to our number 7.
Yeah, number 7. This could be a controversial pick, but I'm going to go with Car, the first album. I mean, I like it a lot, but I find myself not being as into it as I used to be. I mean, I really like Moribund of the Burgermeister. I think that's a great opening track, and Salisbury Hill is obviously a classic. But I don't know the rest of it. I mean, Here Comes the Flood closes out the album really well, but I feel like he was just kind of, what I like about it the most, I think, is he was kind of, you can only get the feeling that he was actively trying to separate himself from Genesis. Like he didn't want to have anything to do with that type of sound, what he was known for. So he was always conscious of trying to deviate from that. But I don't know, I feel like he kind of laid the groundwork for what he would do with the records after this. And there's a lot of good stuff here, but I just don't find myself going back to it as much. I think he definitely planted the seeds for his potential, like in terms of like songwriting and what kind of stuff he wanted to get into in terms of influences. But yeah, I mean, I like it, but yeah, it's not one I mean, compared to the top 4 for me was really hard for this ranking. So I mean, it was almost painful to try and separate, but this one, I mean, I liked it much more when I was younger, and I don't find myself holding it as in high regard as the others. So yeah, it's at number 7.
Yeah, we're not the same on this one. I mean, that's not as egregious as Joey's ranking of Lamb Lies Down at Broadway.
I'm never going to live that down.
You know, we weren't going to make it through this one without me mentioning that. But I don't know, mine might be controversial too. My number 7 is I.O. And again, it's I love this record. I've gone through both mixes. I've seen the whole thing performed live, and it's musically, it's just a beautiful record. I mean, it's a nice listen and everything, but I don't know, it just doesn't. There's only so much of it that just kind of harkens back enough to what I've come to expect in terms of Peter Gabriel's hooks and everything. This is an album that kind of lacks a lot of hooks. There's very few of them. So in terms of, I could see why this would be a record where critics say, "Oh my gosh, this is just a beautifully done album." It is. I mean, it's instrumentation, the band members, all that kind of stuff. It's all great. The quality's great. The sound's great. But I don't know. It's just, to me, it's just missing something. It's a little too many mid to slow tempo numbers, and that's what I got.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of surprised you put it there, but it's
well,
it's a new
and my
album.
favorite song, I can't even really pronounce it. The opener, Panapican or whatever it is. How do you say that? Yeah, whoever says, somebody say that for me, because I just think I'm Panapican. Yeah, I mean, that's a great song. I mean, that's a great song. That's classic Peter Gabriel in terms of it's very hooky. It's it's just a lot of fun. But yeah. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Joey.
No, you're fine. I think this is where everybody's really starts going all over the board here, which is going to be the fun part for our listeners, of course. At least we're all not picking the same all the way through, and we'd really look, why did we bother? We could have just done one each, but so for my number 7, it's the other album I don't own by Gabriel that I mentioned, Security. Yeah, for some reason, I just never really got into this album, which is probably the reason why I never bought it. And believe me, I heard it all the way through many, 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 many times. My brother used to play the hell out of it. So I I know it inside and out, but when I went back to re-listen to it, because I hadn't heard it in a long time, it just, man, it has not aged well in my opinion. Not from what I remembered it before. You know how when you first hear an album and you hear it a lot, you hear it more frequently, and then all of a sudden you don't hear it for like 20 years. It's like, wow. This is definitely one I would not be pulling out, and I'm kind of glad because, man, other than Shock the Monkey and Lay Your Hands on Me, I really thought the rest of the album is really kind of stale. It got stale for me over the years, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just the way the cookie crumbles. The other 6 albums I got ranked ahead of it definitely are better in my estimation, as you will see going forward there. But Security number 7, it only reached as high as 28 on the charts, and it did bring him back to gold status after a couple albums he took off there where he wasn't reaching any status there, but he came back with a gold album here, and this was the predecessor before this big one. But what he did on his predecessor, to So was Security to So are 2 different things, as we will see when we all discuss that era there. So number 7, Security.
Okay, my number 7, and we're all different this time. Our 8s were the same, our number 7s are completely different. My number 7 from 1992, after a 6-year wait, he released the album called Us. It went to number 2 in the UK and number 2 in America, certified platinum here and platinum in England. Produced by Daniel Lanois, best known for his work with U2, and Peter Gabriel. And it just took a long time for him to follow up an album. 6 years back then was way too long, so it didn't nearly do as well as So had 6 years prior. And it has his usual crew that I mentioned earlier. And it had guests Sinead O'Connor, Brian Eno, John Paul Jones, and dozens more. It's a little more mellow than So, I think. And my favorite songs on it are the more upbeat songs. Steam, I think, is really good. Digging in the Dirt, and Kiss That Frog. Those are my 3 favorites. So coming in at number 7, that's my album. And I know it might be a little controversial, but we all see things differently.
All right. Well, let's see how we see number 6.
Yeah, 6 I have Us, 92, I mean, it's every artist has their divorce album, and this was his. Like he got divorced in the like in the late 80s, I believe, and this album he's kind of working through the relationship and like the strained relationship he had with his daughter. That's what a lot of the lyrics are about. I mean, Digging in the Dirt is definitely my favorite song off the album. I thought the version he did in Buffalo back in September was great. That was one of the highlights of the show. But yeah, I mean, it's the chemistry he has with Sinead O'Connor is great. Like if you go back and watch clips of stuff that they performed together live during that period, there's some really good stuff there. You can find it on YouTube, and like she does backing vocals on Blood of Eden. That's also just a beautiful song. But yeah, this is the only album of his I don't own, so and I don't feel like the need to go out and get it anytime soon, really. But yeah, I think it. I was looking up some like reviews that were written at the time, and a lot of people said that it was an album that like grows on you after multiple listens. But yeah, I mean, I went back and listened to it a little bit earlier today, and it's kind of a middle of the pack album for me. So
All right. Number 6 for David. What about you, Tom? What you got for us?
Well, we're not. We don't have the same ranking, but we're 3 in a row, the same record. My 6 is Us, or as I like to call it, U.S., an album about the United States of America. No, I'm just kidding. It's really not. But yeah, no. The singles on here are incredibly strong. They really are. And I didn't get to see him on this tour, but I remember I was dating a woman, and so I can appreciate crazy women and breakups. But she really got into Peter Gabriel. She bought all these DVDs from this tour and everything. This tour was pretty, even though I didn't see it. I mean, the DVDs and the live recordings of it were pretty awesome. But again, he was picking the best songs from the record, and I really love Digging in the Dirt. Come Talk to Me, I think it's probably my favorite track on this particular record. That's just a really, but Come Talk to Me sounds like that could have been on So. You know, it sounded more like So than some of his other stuff. Yeah, so that's what I got. So I said So again. Sorry.
You like repeating yourself with words.
So?
That's all.
No, I just see it's weird. Like you get that one word in your head. I find that sometimes when I'm trying to do a podcast or something, and you get, you know, like is a tough one. It's they say you throw in a word every now and then to buy yourself some time where you're trying to think of your next thought. And I'm very conscientious not to do that, but I find myself doing it like all the time, you know, like now, like that's it, you know, like.
Yeah, I'm surprised all three of you guys picked that one this early on. It's not coming from me for a long time. But just to give you a heads,
wait a minute. Before you say that, I just want to make a plug for an album called Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Okay. So anytime you question Joey Suto's rankings, just remember, and the lamb lies down.
Well, it wasn't
down,
the worst.
down. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's not my favorite Genesis album either.
Yeah, I think
don't
it was,
defend him, Davey.
I think it was 10th out of like whatever how many
no,
albums they got.
Yeah,
so it wasn't like
put
it
it
was
way down.
It
Yeah.
just
No,
it wasn't like
mine's 5th or 6th, I think.
No, I think he put it behind Calling All Stations. It was pretty bad.
No, I did not. don't give me that. Don't give me that. Wow.
There's a lot of Genesis fans laughing pretty hard at that joke.
but anyhow, getting back to us real quick before, because I don't want to lose what you mentioned. Yeah, they did play 6 of the 10 songs when I seen him in Toronto, so it wasn't like he just cherry picked a few. He actually played a good portion, 60% of the album. So it wasn't like he just cherry picked a few songs. It was a great show, but believe it or not, and those songs stood out, mixed in perfectly with the rest of the catalog, surprisingly. And that's probably why it's my favorite Gabriel show that I've ever seen to this date. At least to date. You never know. You know, he could probably go out on tour again. And now that the new album is out, man, who knows what we could do here? We'll see.
Hey, maybe we can watch him seated for the entire show. You know, we did it with Phil.
All right. So we're on number 6 here. And yeah, so my number 6, I don't know if this is going to shock some of you people or not, but it's actually going to be the album that came out in 1978, Peter Gabriel, Scratch. That's the album that went all the way up until it only reached number 45 on the charts. You know, so this is like his second album. His previous album was his debut. It went gold, but this album didn't even chart. And interesting enough, it was produced by a very famous producer, and that's none other than Mr. Robert Fripp, who produced the album. But for some reason, this one just not as strong as the other 5 above it to me. And that's not saying much. It's like David mentioned how hard it was for him with his 4, right? Like your final 4, I guess, right? You were saying it was really a tough call. This is pretty much my, I would say, 2 through 6, same situation. I mean, I knew clear cut my number 1 was a clear cut, but 2 through 6, I didn't know how they were going to fall until I actually went through it and actually ranked them all. And you know, I was actually surprised that this one was a little bit higher. I thought it would end up like 3rd or 4th, but after further review, you know, my favorite song on this one, without a doubt, is DIY. That's classic Gabriel. I must have heard that song 100 times, but what a great song. It kicks off with On the Air, another decent song. And I would say probably an unknown song maybe that I would tell people to give a listen to if you haven't, is Perspective. That song I really like. You know, but that's where we're at, number 6, and those are my choices there.
Okay, coming in at my number 6, his most recent album, I.O. It came out last month of last year, December 2023. It hit number 1 in the UK, but only number 99 in America. which just goes to show you how bad music is in America for the most part
Oh,
nowadays.
wow.
It was produced by Peter Gabriel, Brian Eno, best known for his work with Roxy Music, Talking Heads, U2, etc., and a dude named Richard Russell, who's known for working with Damon Albarn from Blur. And it came 21 years after his last album. Now, he did release a song every month on the full moon for the past year before it came out. So I did hear Panopticon when it came out, which I think is a great song, like Tom said. And some of my other favorites are the title track, I.O., Road to Joy, Olive Tree, and the song called And Still. By the end of the record, it has this menace to it, sort of like some of his older material, which I'll get to after. And it has a ton of people on it, ton of guests and musicians. And there are, of course, two mixes, the bright side and the dark side mix. And when I heard this record recently, I was surprised how much I liked it, first listen, but it's a lot to absorb. There's a lot of songs. And since it's so new, it may climb up my ranking if I listen to it more, but for now it's at number 6. So I.O. at number 6.
All right. We're hitting the top 5 here now.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with I.O. at number 5. Yeah, I listened to all these songs as he was releasing them, but I think when I saw the show, I think that kind of brought it all together for me. So I think that's what and because it's so fresh in my head, I've been listening to it nonstop since I got it. So I mean, I love the Panopticon. I love the Court. I think Love Can Heal was one of the highlights of the show for the new material for me. That's the way that he presented that was very well touching with the visual effects and everything. And I definitely think the bright side mix is slightly better than the dark side mix. It's just the songs have a little more buoyancy to them. But yeah, I can see that some of the reviews were on this were kind of like middle of the pack. Like they said it was good, but it wasn't on par with his earlier stuff. But for a guy in the 70s, I think he's still operating at a pretty high level. So yeah, I like it quite a bit.
Okay. Another I.O. I think that just leaves me left on I.O. So we'll see where that falls for me. What do you got for your number 5 there, Tom?
My number 5 is somebody mentioned this one already. Scratch.
Mhm.
Who said Scratch?
Joey.
Oh, yeah. I agree with a lot of what you said there, Joey, about Scratch, as opposed to what you've said about in the past about Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which I don't agree with anything you've said about that particular record. Go back and listen to that episode, folks. Subscribe to all of our channels. We should do just a whole video about why Joey doesn't like Lamb Lies Down on Broadway as much as he should. But Scratch, you said DIY, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that song. On the Air. It's his second record. You almost get the impression that his second record is always tough. Now, in the case of Gabriel, it's a little different because it's technically, even though it's his second record, it's really just his second solo record. He already had a whole career with Genesis. It's not like, this isn't a new artist coming out with their second ever release. But in terms of the follow-up to his first solo record, I think maybe this would have, but this is only guess. I think maybe he was just pressured to produce material because back in those days, I think it was very cyclical. We've mentioned in passing about the amount of time in between records. Well, there was a period of time, if you wanted to keep your record contract, you just didn't have that much time between records, or you'd face a, costly lawsuit and all that kind of stuff. So to some degree, I felt like, I don't know, those first 4 self-titled records are sort of boxed together in a way in terms of the sound and the musicians and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't really break away from that entirely until So, but of that lot, which is so important to his solo career, I think this was the weakest. It just didn't. And again, weakest is his weakest is probably better than most artists' best will ever be in terms of their career. But and I don't think he does a lot. I think this is just that last tour. I think the only thing he did from the first 4 records was what, Salisbury Hill.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Biko. Yeah.
And
Oh,
Biko,
Biko. Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry.
But
We can't
other than
forget
that,
Biko.
yeah, that's a good way to
Biko.
look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You looking
Yeah.
back at that, you go, wow,
Yeah.
that's hard to believe, ain't it?
Yes and no. I mean, it really feels like there is and we'll get to so at some point, but it really does feel like that is a change. Like there's a period, the prolific period where he's just cranking out records. And then at that point, he has less pressure and kind of works at his own pace. But to some degree, that may have hurt him in the sense that when there was a sense of urgency and he was at his creative apex, he should have been cranking out material. I mean, the Beatles, 6 years, bam, they put out other material. Creedence Clearwater, 3-4 years, bam, they put it out. Billy Joel, and then there comes a point where he doesn't really put out anything anymore. So I don't know. I admire, like with IO, you said, IO was a record from a guy that hasn't put out a record in a long time, and it really had the potential to be a dud. And I think to some degree we measure it based on that, as opposed to just saying if he had come out with 8 records in 15 years, for example, we go, oh, you guys come out over 21 years. Well, this is pretty good. But by the same token, I think that his records suffer because of that a little bit too. His newer ones, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you made a very valid point, and that I didn't even notice until you started talking about the time between albums. This was a year after Car came out, his debut. So you're talking, those are the 2 closest albums he's ever made together, ever, for the first 2. And then, the next one was 1980, then 82, 86. So, and then from there, it just grew and grew and grew, the time between albums. So very interesting take on that. And it's definitely, I think you hit the nail on the head right there with that whole mentioning of that. I mean,
one of two things is going to happen when you're cranking out albums. You've either got you're either just really, you got a lot of material and you're cranking it out, or you're going to be rushing to write songs to fill up a record. Obviously IO, he didn't have to put in a filler per se because he had 21 years to create those songs. So I mean, who knows? He could have literally could have written 2 songs a year. That's crazy. But you got to put out 4 records, and what were the first 4? First 4 had to be within 5-6 years tops, right?
77 to 82.
So how many is that? 5?
5.
Yeah. 4 records in 5 years. I mean, you got to write, and you got to tour. Although I don't think he toured until maybe the second or third.
Well, I don't think he toured heavily either. I think he did, it wasn't a heavy tour like a lot of these US bands.
He did by the 4th record. The Security tour was pretty extensive.
Yeah, but definitely.
Yeah.
All right, so that was your number 5. So
Yes.
My number 5 is the aforementioned. I'm the last kid to the block here to mention this one. IO. And very good album. You got to remember, it only just came out in December. And I really feel he really dropped the ball, as I mentioned in previous videos. If you saw our other video about the tour itself, he really needed to put this album out before he toured. There's no doubt in my mind. And that's why Davey, it only reached number 99. Had he put this album out like, a month or 2 before he went out on the road and toured it, and everybody was more familiar with it, he definitely would have sold more copies. There's no doubt in my mind. And that's the reason why he you make your bed, you got to lie in it. That's my take on it. I think he really burned himself on it. I think it really hurt because everybody doesn't stream. You can say this and say that. I did not listen to. I think I listened to 2 of the. What was it, David? Was it about 12 songs or 10 he released before the album came out? I didn't have
12.
time to go there and listen to tracks. I hate streaming because I don't have my computer. It sounds like a computer. You can't get the full sound like you can on a stereo. Am I right, Tom?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, come on, shut up.
It's what I one of the reasons I like albums is because it forces you to listen to the album. You put an album side on, and we're all human. We tend to be kind of lazy and and we tend to get very distracted. So my problem with streaming is a lot of times it just makes it too easy to skip songs. That's why I don't like to stream. In terms of the quality, I think the quality is fine. I mean, if you get yourself a good pair of headphones, and I've streamed through my sound system. I mean, it's comparable to CDs, in my opinion, at least these days, depending on what service you're listening to. But yeah, I don't know. To me, the listening experience is like, well, like I said, he puts out the songs one at a time. I didn't really enjoy him either, and I didn't like him until I saw him presented in the full form in concert. And then I was like, oh yeah, I get it. I can see where this kind of all comes together thematically, and blah blah blah. But to some degree, it was a blessing and a curse in that nobody. I mean, I've seen. I already made it this far without saying Todd Rundgren, but I'll say Todd Rundgren, for example, toured records for a year or two before the record came out because he had issues with the record company. So by the time the record came out, if you had seen the show, it was like, oh wow, kind of brought you back to the show, which was pretty cool. I think in this case with Gabriel, it was just my thought was that he was kind of trying to prove something to himself by being able to perform it before the full album was out. But I also got the impression, based on crowd reactions, that a lot of people were not there for the new stuff. They still wanted the old stuff. The reaction to the old stuff versus the new stuff was so dramatic that you could tell that, yeah. And a lot of that's pricing, concert pricing too, because who's up front these days? It's I'm not trying to sound classist, but it's the rich people. You got the money, you're sitting up front, and that in turn creates a very different vibe in an auditorium. You get people that will go to shows because they want to prove they have the money to go to the shows. Oh, look at me. I got front row seats to Peter Gabriel. It's like, do you own a Peter Gabriel album? They don't care. So for the songs that they don't know, they'll sit back and absorb it. And I think he had a good reaction. But the ultimate thing is that the guy plays Sledgehammer. You would think that he just wrote Freebird, I mean, everybody's going berserko. And then 3 minutes ago, most of the people are sitting there, chatting to their girlfriend and getting ready to go to get a beer. It's just, so I don't know. You said you can't win. You can't win. And again, I think that the listening habits of people are different. But for a guy like Peter Gabriel to think that his audience at their age is going to be leaning towards streaming, I don't know that that's the case either. I mean, I think there are older people that still, they do like, if they don't like streaming, and they don't have a record player anymore because they're too old to have a record player, they're just going to spend the $5,000 on the front row seat and say, oh, I heard it and it was good, honey, whatever. Let us go to the country club after the Peter Gabriel show. It was wonderful. Oh, I loved it. He played all new stuff though, dear. It was horrible. I wish he played more stuff. He should have played Biko twice.
But that's just a take that I had on it. I just felt that had he released it a couple months before, number one, the album would have sold better. Number two, the people that were there would have been a little bit more into the show, and you wouldn't have seen the night and day difference between some of the older songs and the newer songs. It would have been more like a traditional show for him.
I don't think he helped himself by putting out two mixes either. I think that to some degree is confusing because they're not all that much. I mean, they're different, but
they're different.
It's not like they're entirely different. And then the record itself, because there's so many songs, the vinyl is super expensive. I mean, it's not a cheap record. So, again, you'll pay $3,000 for the concert ticket, but not $50 for the vinyl. I don't know. People are strange.
But I'm in agreement with David when I agree the Bright Side mix is much better than the Dark Side mix.
Yeah.
Not that the Dark Side mix is bad, but I just enjoyed the Bright Side mix a little bit more. So obviously we are all in agreement that Panopticon is the best song on the album. I would say pretty much. And Still was one of the ones I had also written down too, Mr. Cretin. And I liked Playing for Time and The Court. Those two songs, those first four songs really helped make the album for me, for sure. That's what helped propel it to number 5. It got it past the other 3 albums that it beat. But not quite there to beat off my number 4, which you'll see what that is when we get to it. All right, Davey.
Okay. My number 5 has already been mentioned, from 1978. His second record, Scratch, reached number 10 in the UK and number 45 here, as Joey said. It did not certify in America or England. And it was produced, like you said, by Mr. Robert Fripp, who played guitar, Frippertronics on it, his usual stuff. And it had Tony Levin on bass, Jerry Marotta on drums, Sid McGuinness from David Letterman's old TV show band on guitars and other stringed instruments, and Larry Fast from Synergy on synthesizers. And it's a good album, great playing. Personally, I just don't think the songs are as good on this album as his other first 4 records. And my 2 favorites, you guys already mentioned, DIY and On the Air. So that's my number 5, his second album, Scratch.
All right. Let's go down to number 4.
Oh yeah, 4. I'm gonna go with Security. It's a great album. I love The Rhythm of the Heat is a great opener. The Family in the Fishing Net was influenced by a lot of Dylan Thomas poetry that Peter Gabriel was into at the time, and I'm a big fan of Thomas's poetry also. So that's one of the things that got me into this album to begin with. And I definitely think the production has that kind of 80s sound to it. It's definitely dated in that sense. But I mean, I still like Shock the Monkey. I still get into when I hear it from time to time. He's always been politically motivated. So like songs like Wallflower have to do with a lot of like issues of like global politics that were going on in the 80s. But yeah, I mean, it's only 8 songs, and I I like it. And like he has Peter Hamill from Vandergraaf Generators on here, like Tony Levin's, obviously David Rhodes, and it's a good album, but it's a tough. Other than Shock the Monkey, I think if you're not familiar with it, it's tough to really get people into it. There's not a lot of commercial about it outside of that song, so it's not very accessible. But yeah, it's a fun listen.
Okay. Tom? What
All
you
right,
got?
number 4, numero 4. Beep, 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 yeah. Car.
Yeah.
So, let's see, Car's the first one, right?
Yep. Debut.
Yeah. Yeah, there was, man, I wish I read it somewhere, and for the life of me, I can't remember the deal with the cover. That is an actual picture of somebody's car. And I think that they superimpose his image on it later, but it's very interesting artwork. I love the artwork on the first 4 records. It's I mean, it's weird that we've assigned them names, but it's another thing, Joey, we were just talking about how like, he should have released the album before the tour, blah, blah, blah. It's like, here's a guy that comes out with 4 records that are the same name, that later on somebody had to assign something to them because he just didn't do it, and we'll talk about So later, but it was kind of weird when he broke that cycle, because it almost seems like those first 4 records are continuing thematically. But yeah, I mean, Salisbury Hill, I mean, what can you say? Just such an incredible song. Definitely, you could tell that this is the lead singer of Genesis. And what was the last record with Genesis that he had before he went solo, Joey?
Oh, that
What was
Bomb,
it?
the Lamb?
Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
The Bomb. Yeah.
But if you listen to Lamb, it definitely, and this record, I mean, there's some similarities, but you could definitely tell where he was kind of, he was feeling constrained in Genesis, because Lamb obviously is I think Tony Banks doesn't get enough credit in terms of driving the sound on that particular record, but I understand that there was some creative tension between the two of them as they were trying to exert themselves on that record anyway. But so here we go. We got the guy. He's got his first chance to come out with a solo record, and who knows how much of this stuff he banked. But I just feel like, even though it doesn't have as many of the the radio hits or any of that kind of other stuff, it's just a really solid. You could tell that this was a record that he made to prove something to the world, that he didn't need Genesis anymore. And I wonder, here's a thought I will throw out to the panel. Does anyone think that Peter Gabriel would have been nearly as popular as a solo artist if Genesis hadn't gone off to the stratosphere? Because I think he I think he benefited tremendously from the Phil Collins Genesis, that there were a lot of people that went back and then started listening to Gabriel stuff when Genesis became more popular. Or is that just me?
No, I just think the way he changed his music when it came to soul. You know, he wasn't writing in the same style. You know, he put on horns and he really jammed it in and went more towards a pop sound on a lot of the songs, as
But
opposed.
I mean, he was only playing, 2,000 seat clubs until Genesis started becoming an arena act.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you look at the career of Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel as solo artists, it's like night and day. Phil Collins really went pop.
Right.
Gabriel went pop, but he went in a different direction of pop. You know what I'm saying? It's not like the same type of stuff that Phil Collins did.
But what's crazy is that, so what year is this record? Does this record come out? 77, his first solo record?
Yeah.
Yes.
So even all these years later, even after I.O., which was, how many years after he left Genesis, nobody can mention Peter Gabriel without mentioning Genesis, even though it represented such a small part of his career.
That's true.
It's just weird. It's just weird to me.
Yeah.
But anyhow, that's what I got for this particular record.
He didn't even really acknowledge the time in Genesis up until they played their final show. He actually showed up to see them off. So
yeah, he still didn't. I mean, and he only sang. I think it was. I mean, he did "Lamb Lies Down" on Broadway, the song. Maybe his first. No, I think it did. We do back in New York City, like on some early dates, solo dates. But he rarely did Genesis stuff. They did
Right.
Dancing in the Moonlit Night or something like that not too long ago, but with Sting. But yeah, it's weird how, I mean, he didn't want to be associated with Genesis, but yet we still got to mention. And like every time a Genesis reunion would come up, we'd be like, oh, of course, Peter Gabriel. It's like, you guys weren't listening to Genesis when Peter Gabriel was in it. Come on.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
That's what you got, and I got the same one, so we can just carry this conversation right on.
Look at that. So I don't have to take that record and show it 20 times to say that you were wrong, right?
So we got number 38. That was his debut solo album. It went gold, and it was produced by the guy who produced Kiss, Bob Ezrin. Wow, what a weird producer, huh?
He did. He worked. He did Pink Floyd, right? He did.
He went. I just threw Kiss in there to make it sound a little bit different, but
I didn't know he did Kiss, but that's interesting.
Yeah, he did a lot of people, really, and definitely. So yeah, but so it was interesting that he was the one that was tapped to do this album. Obviously Salisbury Hill, probably the most enduring song from the early part of the Gabriel catalog. Here Comes the Flood, man, I'll tell you, I seen that song performed live just once. It was on the Us tour, and he only did it at certain shows. So at the end of the show, it had like a unique thing where he would like pack up the briefcase and go into down these stairs that were like right on the stage. Right in the middle of the stage, there was like a set of stairs everybody walked out of, and Gabriel was the last one that left. And then the show ends when he goes down and closes the hatch behind him. So it was pretty cool. So that's how he intended the show to actually end. But in Toronto, he came back out. Everybody thought the show was over because that's what he was usually doing at most of the shows. And then he came back out. There was just a piano up on stage, and he played "Here Comes the Flood," man. And I'll tell you, that place went nuts for that song. What a great way to end the show. And it was like a surprise because nobody knew it was coming. The lights were on. Everybody's walking up there at the ramps to go out of the venue. And me and my brother, we had to run back in real quick to make sure we didn't miss it. It was just a surprise that nobody expected, but it was great. So
he did play it in Detroit on this last tour, but Buffalo didn't get it. So.
Oh, really? Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Didn't know that. All right, and so then I think "Modern Love" was another good song on this album. He's got it's definitely a decent debut. I mean, could it have been better? Yeah, it could have been better, but still, I feel it's his fourth best album, and aided by Salisbury Hill, Here Comes the Flood. But it was a great beginning, and then he took it to higher heights from there. Obviously, down the road, a couple albums later. So that is my number 4.
Okay, my number 4 from 1982, his fourth solo album, Security, that most of you guys mentioned already. Pardon me. It went to number 6 in the UK, and as Joey said, only number 28 in America, but it did certify gold here and overseas. This record was produced by Gabriel and a guy named David Lord. Unfortunately, Peter Gabriel's first wife had an affair with David Lord, the producer, so David Lord never worked with Gabriel again. And for some odd reason, Peter Gabriel and his wife stayed together for about another 5 years until they got divorced, like David said earlier. And then I think it was Us from 1980. Yes, Us from 1992 became his divorce album. But it all goes back to this album from 1982, Security. And I think it's a very good record. He released, like David Lee Roth released the Spanish version of his solo album, Gabriel released this album in German, sings the whole album in German. It has his usual cast and crew, and my favorite song, Shock the Monkey, I Have the Touch, I think is great, San Jacinto, and Tom mentioned it earlier, The Rhythm of the Heat. So at number 4, Security.
Mm.
All right, and we're going down to our top 3. What do you got there, David?
I'm gonna go with So at number 3.
Wow. There goes our.
I love this record. I mean, Red Rain is amazing. Sledgehammers I like. Don't Give Up is probably my favorite song off the album. That was also my favorite song of the show in Buffalo. I mean, obviously Kate Bush does the duet with him on this album. It's great. I'm a big Kate Bush fan. But and there are so many versions that he's done with different female vocalists over the years, and they're all great. Just the lyrical content of the song always resonates with me. But I think the only song I really don't like on here is Big Time. I mean, when he played it at the show in Buffalo, it kind of took me out of it a little bit. But it's not a terrible song, but it just doesn't really fit with the overall. Like, I mean, I love Mercy Street and In Your Eyes is great. I mean, I think it's a perfect example of how to do a pop album without sacrificing your artistic integrity, because there's still like a lot of sophisticated arrangements on here, and it's artistic in the way that Peter Gabriel always has been. I mean, he just happened to sell 5 million copies in the process. So,
Yes, he did.
Yep.
Tom?
So I have So as well. At 3.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah,
Amazing.
for many of the same reasons Mr. Hens has. I agree with that. I think Big Time is it's cheesy. It's a cheesy song. And it really is. It's just cheesy. I think what makes So work though, and for the life of me, I don't know which one came first, whether it was this or Graceland. Does anyone know whether Graceland by Paul Simon predates this one or not?
Yeah, it does.
I think
84,
okay,
I
yeah.
believe.
Yeah, so I think he must have benefited from that because there was this sort of like African rhythm thing that was kind of kicking around at the time. Everybody was, it was sounded the flavor of the week. He did take advantage of that.
Oh.
I mean, in terms of like just production and how lush this record sounds in places. I mean, In Your Eyes, wow. I mean, what a great vocal performance. I think it really encapsulates everything everybody loves about Peter Gabriel. Don't Give Up, the gut wrenching ballad, which, like you said, I mean, it's not female vocal dependent. It'd be interesting to hear another male handle as well. It's just such a good song. It doesn't really matter who sings it. It just thematically, it's something that probably resonates with a lot of people that have dealt with any kind of challenges in life. Sledgehammer to me is just a song that was overplayed. When I first heard it, I really enjoyed it, but it just became ubiquitous and kind of annoying, especially the MTV video. And I think Big Time is almost like Sledgehammer's little brother anyway. It's they bear a lot of similarities. what's the other one? Well, Mercy Streets, great song. Red Rain, we already mentioned. That Voice Again, great song as well. So a little bit of filler, a little bit of overreach in terms of commercialness. And hey, I mean, if you're not commercial, you don't sell records, then you don't make records. So I don't begrudge any artist that wants to go commercial. Please sell records so you can continue making them. But this definitely was, I think when it first came out, myself and maybe some other people, we felt very conflicted about it, in the sense that Peter Gabriel was sort of our little secret, those first 4 records, and they had similar covers and the same typeface in terms of the logo. And, he was still like the people that liked Phil Collins. We were the cool ones that liked Peter Gabriel instead of Phil Collins. And then Peter Gabriel became as popular as Phil Collins, and we just didn't know what to do with it at times. But, and again, I think the record, I said, other than like Big Time and Sledgehammer, I think the record still holds up really well. But yeah, I mean, and again, it's number 3. It's not like I'm saying that this is a trash album. I mean, it's a masterpiece. Let's just call it for what it is. It's a masterpiece. It was it's probably at the top of most people's lists for whatever, and I can't, I mean, if somebody has this as their top record, I can't necessarily argue with them, because there's a lot of reasons this should be the best album in his catalog in terms of ranking. It's just not in mine, or Hens as well.
It's true. All right, so my number 3 is something different, and I believe this is the first time we're talking about this one, and that would be the 1980 release, known as Peter Gabriel Melt, which reached number 22 on the charts in the U.S., produced by Steve Lillywhite, and features a couple guests on here, none other than Mr. Phil Collins on a few selections there. Played drums on Intruder, the opening track, and No Self-Control, and Through the Wire. Phil talked about that during one of they had like all these, the whole Genesis band, Gabriel, Hackett, Rutherford, Banks, and Phil all on there, like sitting in chairs. A guy was interviewing them, and I don't know if you ever seen that video. It's like a 3-parter. It's pretty intense. You could see still to this day Tony Banks, the friction between him and pretty much everybody but maybe Rutherford. It's like those are the only 2 guys that really, you can see steam coming out of Banks's head when he when he starts talking about certain things. It's pretty intense, really. But Phil mentioned about playing on Peter's album. He had some downtime. Gabriel needed some drums put down, and Phil was happy to come over and play on a few tracks, which was pretty cool. Obviously, the big song on here, without a doubt, Games Without Frontiers. Not sure why Gabriel really doesn't really play this one live as much as he. You figured it would be a big highlight of the set, but
I just don't know how he produced it without a lot of stuff pumped in synthesizer wise. And I think he avoided that. Like if you listen to Plays Live, which is one of my favorite live albums by any artist, you can tell there is some overdubs. He even says that on the record, that he polished off, some of the stuff that might have been messed up. But I mean, it's the band. I mean, and which is even more incredible,
I don't believe our artists when they say, well, we can't play this song because, no, it's garbage.
Alan Parsons didn't do it, but if they're just going to pump in that whole whistle thing, it's like when Queen does Bohemian Rhapsody. They just play the middle section. It's not like you can't reproduce that live.
Right.
So but how's he going to reproduce Games Without Frontier live unless he gets a whole bunch of really good whistlers?
You rewrite it. You do it differently. That's all. You just do it differently. I mean, Gabriel is known for improvising.
Yeah.
He should have done it like that. But I've seen it live. He played it, but he just doesn't play it a lot. That's what I was trying to say.
I've never heard it. I have to hear a live recording. I'd be fascinating. I think I should look it up, because I think, David, you said something about it too, didn't you?
Yeah, I have this So box set, and there's a live concert from Athens in 1987, and there's a version of Games Without Frontiers on there, but it's almost a completely different arrangement.
Yeah.
So he doesn't pump in
he almost tailored it to fit how the band sounded at that time.
Right. Well, that's what remember Triumph and Hold On, Joey. That's why they had a problem with that song, because they just because people were so accustomed to the studio version, Now, you and I and other people, not that we're better than anybody else. I don't believe that for a minute, but I think we're more accepting in terms of artists taking chances. But there are still people that expect if you're going to play a song in concert, it better sound pretty damn close to the version that they grew up with. And if it moves too far away, one that's really popular like that one. I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing because I'm not friends with Peter Gabriel, but that's the only reason I think that he didn't do it very often, because he could never produce a version that everybody would be happy with, or maybe even that he was happy with.
Well, I mean, the last show I've seen was John Waite, and he even went totally off the board on some of his songs, and he still sounded good, but there must have been a reason why he wasn't performing the song like it was recorded. You know, maybe maybe it was tuned down a step or so, but he could have sang it. It sounded like maybe he just doesn't want to take the chance on risking the voice. Maybe because you can blow yourself out. Ask Steven Tyler that question. But yeah, but getting back to Games Without Frontiers as being probably the highlight of his whole catalog in my estimation. I don't think he's got a song better than that one. And that was even Paulette was upset that they didn't play it when we saw him in Buffalo this past time. But I told her, yeah, I knew they weren't going to play that one because he did play it on the Us tour, but not every show. It was one of those songs he would mix in and mix out for whatever reason. But the album kicks off good with Intruder, which is a unique sound and everything. And Through the Wire, those are the two of the three that Phil plays on. And then Biko, of course, ends the album, and that usually is exactly how Peter Gabriel ends his shows with Biko. So, definitely a solid album. What else can be said about it? I'm sure you guys will have your takes on it when it comes up, since I'm the first to mention it. So I can't wait to hear what all you got to say about it. But I like it. Number 3 for me.
Okay. I just want to add to the discussion about him playing it live in concert. I think Peter Gabriel is an artist who's always moving forward, and he likes to look forward and move forward. And he plays a lot of his new material live, more so than the old stuff, because that's what he loves in his heart, is his new material. And that's what he's promoting. So I think that's why he doesn't play a lot of stuff from the first few albums. It's just the way he is. He's innovative. He's progressive, and he's way more progressive, you could say, than many other prog rock artists, is that he follows his own muse and his heart. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. My number 3 begins with 2 words, and sometimes it's how I start my videos on my own channel, Cretin Classics. Hi there. Coming in at number 3 from 1986. So I agree with Tom and with David. That's my number 3. It went to number 1 in England, went 3 times platinum in England. Here it only reached number 2, which is still great. And it went 5 times platinum, easily his biggest seller. And the reason, it was produced by him and Daniel Lanois, best known for working with the U2. And it's a bunch of catchy songs. And I think his innovative videos for Don't Give Up, Sledgehammer, and Big Time, that helped cement him with MTV. And this is when he hit the zeitgeist and just blew up. And it just happened to be the same time that Genesis blew up with all their videos and their pop-centered sound, for the most part. Although Genesis still have a prog song on just about every album, even after Gabriel and Hackett left. But I don't want to derail the conversation. My favorite songs on this album are basically the 5 singles that he released in America. My favorite being Red Rain. And that's why I went out and bought the vinyl. Because even though I'd heard all his hits on radio before, something about Red Rain just grabbed me. And it's one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite Gabriel song. So number 3 is So.
All right. Well, we got 2 left each. Let's make them count. Go ahead, David.
Yeah. Number 2, I'm going to go with Scratch. I've always loved this record. I mean, there's really nothing commercial about it at all. I mean, I'm a big King Crimson fan, so Robert Fripp's production has always been appealing to me. He does a lot of like stark sounds on this album, just like different things that pop up in the background. But his guitar solo on White Shadow is great. I mean, you guys mentioned On the Air and DIY. They're both great songs. Mother of Violence features some great piano work from Roy Bittan from the E Street Band. And the melody he comes up with there is as good as anything he ever did with Springsteen. I think it's just really moving. And then side two, I mean, Fripp uses the Frippertronics on Exposure, which he also did on his '79 album named Exposure, which is a great record too. But Perspective is great. Home Sweet Home. It's not an album that I think a lot of people go back to or seek out on a regular basis. But if you listen to it from start to finish, I think it can be rewarding. So yeah, that's my number two.
Okay. Tom?
Numero dos. Security. Somebody had this a lot lower. Who was that?
Number
Joey.
7. Number 7.
We've this is a common theme on this show, which is I think one of the things that makes it great. And Joey, obviously, if I'm sure I speak for the other three guys, thanks for hosting these things. They're always a lot of fun, and we definitely enjoy them. And we enjoy. You're always a good sport and all that kind of good stuff. But we always say this. I mean, I know you've said it, I've said it. I'm sure that Davey will agree with us, and Mr. Hens as well. We sometimes a record it gets us at a time, and it's a sentimental favorite. So this is my sentimental favorite because I did see him on the tour for this particular record, and he performed a hunk of it. And I think that most of the versions that are on Plays Live are actually better than the studio versions, with the possible exception of Shock the Monkey. But yeah, we had this. I think when we did the Supertramp thing, I mentioned that there was a lot of songs on the Paris record that I felt were better live than some of the studio versions. But I don't know, man. I was in high school when this thing came out. I just loved it. Shock the Monkey was very different. I mean, it was one of the first conceptual videos, but at that point you're looking at videos by Loverboy, which were just performance videos. And then some of the other stuff was just kind of cheesy. There was Shock the Monkey to me was kind of the first one that was sort of an intense in your face kind of thing. And I think, Genesis did the claymation thing and Gabriel did some videos with So that were innovative, but Shock the Monkey just more seemed very kind of cinematic and cool. And, the songs were interesting in terms of the themes, just different than anything else that was on at the time. I love the song I Have the Touch, Rhythm of the Heat. You got that great rhythm that just kind of lays the foundation for the record. To me, side one of this record is phenomenal. And then side two, there's a little bit of a drop off maybe on the last two cuts, but overall, just definitely a sentimental favorite. And again, the end of an era, because I think this is the bookend of those first four records that really are kind of a package deal.
Okay. So you're number 2. And maybe that's why my number 2 is number 2, because it's sentimental favorites. First time I ever got to see Mr. Gabriel was for the tour of this album, and that is none other than the 1992 release, Us, which we've talked about. I don't know. For some reason, this album really, I really enjoyed it. It's just one of these albums that, for me, to coincide with seeing the tour for the album and everything, kind of brought it home. Kind of like how Tom mentioned how when you got to see the I.O. tour, it seemed to tie a lot of the loose ends together with the album and everything. In your estimation, there, similar to mine too. I believe the same thing. I seen the tour. I think he did come out with a regular live release for the album from that tour, the Us tour, but I actually got a bootleg of before the regular live album came out. I had a bootleg copy somewhere, really good sounding bootleg of a show. And man, it really brought back the memories. And that came out before the actual album for the regular studio or the regular live release that was released on his label there. But it was just great hearing these songs live. And I'll tell you, he started the concert off coming out of a phone booth there singing "Come Talk to Me." What a great, you never forget it. And I remember seeing the Genesis tribute band Over the Garden Wall, they performed music of Genesis, Gabriel, Phil Collins. You know, they kind of they always do a good mix. They're like a local area band. And I'll tell you, they did the same thing. They brought the, the telephone booth out, started off with Come Talk to Me, and it was amazing how good they sounded when they did that. But the cool thing was, you know, that's Come Talk to Me on the album itself, you know, and Blood of Eden. Those are the two songs that Sinead O'Connor did the background vocals on. And you know, she really brings a lot of life to those songs on the studio version. So obviously when in live, she's not on there, so it's a totally different atmosphere, you know, as opposed to that. But you know, it's odd. Steam was the big hit for me. I remember when I first heard that song on the radio, you know, it's one of those songs where you figure he'd be performing it for the rest of his life, kind of like Sledgehammer, you know.
Mhm.
But for some reason, he pretty much just dropped it. He hasn't played it live in years, not even on the tour when I saw him in 2013. He didn't even play it. So I was kind of surprised that he's kind of ignored, you know. But like Tom said, you know, he seems to focus in on the new albums. You know, so that's just the way he is. I think David might have mentioned some of it. Davey mentioned some of it too, like that. But to me, Us is just one of these great albums. I just out of this catalog, I can really get into this album. Um, you know, it reached number 2. Was that sound about right, Davey? Is that what you had it down for?
Let's see.
So that was the follow-up to
Yes,
So.
number two
So
in America and England.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to remember that's at the time when, you know, come out right around the time when grunge was really picking up, 92. So at that point, he was still relevant, still selling albums, and you know, even though there was a 6-year delay from So, which was the astronomical album that put him up there. But like David said, Digging in the Dirt, yeah, definitely one of the highlights of this past tour that we saw. That's definitely this another great song on the album, and yeah, just that's all these things led to my factoring in, making it my my second favorite Peter Gabriel solo release.
Okay. Before I reveal my number 2, I just wanted to say I really like what David said before about, I meant to say this last go around and I forgot. When you said that So was a commercial album and he made a commercial popular album without selling out, I thought that was a great succinct point. So I just wanted to point that out and give you props for that, David.
Thanks.
Coming in at number 2 from 1980, his third album, Melt, as it's known. It went number 1 in the UK. It hit number 22 here in America, like Joey said. It went gold in England, but did not certify it here in America. And it was produced by Steve Lillywhite Lillett. And that joke is just for you, Joey. Lillywhite Lillett.
What record?
any
What
rate-
record is that song on, by the way?
The
Do we know?
Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
What a great record that is.
1974. Not
It's
their
50 years.
best, but a very good album. Personally, I'm partial to Selling England. That's my favorite Genesis record. But I have a lot of notes on this album because Peter Gabriel made an edict on this album. No cymbals. The drummers that played on the album could not play cymbals on this record. There were no cymbals anywhere on this record. So it gives the album an unusual, intriguing, sinister, and claustrophobic feel, because usually when a drummer is doing a drum roll, it ends with a cymbal crash. So it's sort of like, it's very claustrophobic, it's unresolving because there are no cymbals on the record. Now, Phil Collins, like you said, Joey, who played on a bunch of songs on the record, he was very good at this. And Jerry Marotta, it took him a little time to catch on to this no cymbals thing. He wasn't used to this at all. And this album features the first prominent use of a gated reverb drum sound. And it was cooked up in the lab by the studio wizardry of Lillywhite Lillett, Phil Collins, and the engineer, Hugh Padgham, who eventually went on to do a lot of work with Phil Collins and Genesis. A drum machine was also used by Peter Gabriel. And there are some different members of the band on this record. On guitars, David Rhodes, the aforementioned excellent Robert Fripp, David Gregory from XTC, and even Paul Weller, of all people from The Jam, plays on a song. John Giblin did the bulk of the bass, except Tony Levin plays on, I think it's Intruder, and the bass work on that song is amazing. Larry Fast on synthesizers, and once again, Kate Bush on backing vocals. He also released a German version of this album, and my favorite songs here, Intruder, No Self-Control, I Don't Remember, which is an amazing song, Games Without Frontiers, and Biko that you guys mentioned. This was close to my number one, but falls at number 2, Melt from 1980.
All right, so we're gonna have some surprises here, in my estimation. I really thought that everybody was gonna have So at number 1, except maybe Hens. I don't know. For some reason, David, I didn't think you'd have it at number 1, and I was right. But I didn't thought you'd I thought you'd have it at number 2, but you picked it at 3. So let's see what you got for your number 1.
Yeah, my number 1 is Melt. So yeah, I mean, I love this record. I mean, the side 1 is just excellent. Intruder is great. No Self-Control. Start, I Don't Remember. Family Snapshot. I listened to this album probably more than any other from his catalog over the years. I mean, Games Without Frontiers is great. Biko is great. I'm just for a record that came out in 1980. I feel like he was on the cutting edge of technology at that point. Like they were making a lot of sounds on this record that he was basically just creating from scratch, and it just adds an entire ambiance to the record. And every time I put it on, it pulls me right in. So yeah, I knew it was going to be in my number 1 before I even sat down to think about it. But yeah, so yeah, it's got a great Hypnosis album cover too. I always like that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, Melting Away.
Yeah,
Well,
that's my number 1 is Melt as well.
wow.
But yeah, it's just, oh my God, such a, yeah. I mean, Games Without Frontiers, I don't know who mentioned that as their favorite Gabriel song of all time. That's definitely mine as well. Just
nice.
love that song. I don't know. There's just something about it. Just something about the whole whistling thing and everything. It's just, it's just a great song. But yeah, I mean, it's still, everything on it holds up well. I didn't know the no cymbal thing. You've taught me something. Now the next time I listen to it, I'm going to listen for a cymbal. But you know,
You won't find any.
But I'm wondering if on Plays Live, when he did the Plays Live stuff, if they added cymbals to it.
That I'm not sure of.
Yeah, I'm not either. I mean, I just wonder. I mean, I don't remember. Oh man, Intruder. I mean, that drum beat to Intruder. I guess it all kind of makes sense right now. It's just
Biko. He does it. He never added no cymbals for sure.
Yeah.
Biko.
I mean, what a crazy song. I mean, that's you know, we haven't said this in this particular episode. I don't know if ever, but you know, really, Biko is one of those songs that really speaks to the power of music in terms of being able to educate people. You know, I mean, I didn't know. I mean, when I was a high school kid, you know, smoking joints on lunch, whatever. I mean, I didn't know who Stephen Biko was. And then when you have a guy like Peter Gabriel who sings a song about him, you kind of look into it. And then, I mean, honestly, I don't know if I had my head in the sand, but there didn't seem to be a lot of reporting about apartheid and South Africa, and you know, and then eventually music, you know, unites together to fight apartheid. And I don't know how much of that wound up toppling apartheid, but certainly it did something. I mean, you had a musical movement that helped get rid of a political system that was clearly oppressive towards particular people. And this song, it's interesting because to some degree, I guess maybe you could say the song is dated, you know, because this happened a long time ago. But I mean, Nelson Mandela, you know, he didn't really die that long ago, so it's an important issue. But yeah, I mean, that's a song that, you know, that's Gabriel taking an incident, and again, I think that's what makes the song work, is that it's powerful in its message. It's singable because, you know, it's an easy chorus, Biko, you wonder how many people, when they sing it, if they even really think of Stephen Biko, but Gabriel always mentions it before he sings, this is for Stephen Biko, but I don't know. I give him a lot of credit for that. Cause again, politics and music, I think even now those lines have been delineated more than blurred. I mean, anybody that does anything that seems overtly political is going to either side of the spectrum. I mean, you look at Ted Nugent, who's gone one extreme, and then you have, maybe I'll say, my guy Todd Rundgren on the other end of it, and then people say, I don't want to hear you talking about politics. I came here to hear you bang the drum and do the stranglehold, So, but back then, I think it was, and I mean, bands like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, I mean, singing Ohio, I mean, music really did have an important place in society in terms of not just entertaining, but educating and increasing awareness about particular situations. So, yeah, that's what I got for that. I'll get off my high horse now.
And obviously, Bob Dylan did a lot of political songs, so he's
sure.
like the
Yeah,
king
but you
of
couldn't
political.
understand what he was saying. If Dylan sang Biko, it'd be like, Mingo, Mingo, Mingo.
Now, what do you remember about that security tour? Because you said that was the first one you saw. What do you remember about the Biko part of it?
It was the last song of the night, if I remember correctly, or I think On the Air was the final encore. So On the Air was the last song, and then Biko was the encore. He had the face paint. He had this white face paint on it. The thing that I remember most about seeing him live was Tony Levin. He's just he's such an unusual instrumentalist, and there's just nobody else that plays like him that's in a hugely popular band. I mean, I'm sure there's other guys that play, club level, maybe jazz guys or whatever, that do some interesting things on bass, but he's just to me, he's like the Eddie Van Halen of bass. I mean, you can imitate him, but you can't copy him. He was quite the innovator, and his sounds were such an important part to Gabriel's records, and absolutely to his live shows. Just incredible stuff. And he was a bit of a local celebrity in the Rochester area because he went to Eastman School of Music. Him and Steve Gadd, drummer Steve Gadd. But yeah, I remember it being stunningly visual, but in the sense that it was very minimalist. A lot of his later tours were very big productions and all that kind of stuff. This was just a very low lit thing that forced you to really focus on the music. But it was great. I mean, it was great, but he played the Rochester War Memorial, which is I think a 9,000 seat venue, and they took a curtain and put it halfway through because he was right around he was pulling about 3,000. So there wasn't a good sized venue for him. So he couldn't even sell out. But then the next time he came back to Rochester was a So tour, and he rehearsed there for a week. So he sold that out. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. He was what he was doing at the time after those first 4 records. Really, nobody else was doing. Yeah. At least between the combination of the prog and the pop elements, but just incorporating just these really unique rhythms. It really comes down to the rhythms, and of course the lyrics. You get a band like Rush that has these very complex lyrics because of Neil Peart and do you guys say Peart or Pert? Because I've always said Pert. Yeah, see, I say Pert. I say Pert. I always say Pert.
Like but anyhow, shampoo?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I don't really use shampoo much anymore, Joe, except for the beard.
I always thought his parents pronounced it Peart, so that's how I always said it.
Yeah, me too.
I've always said Pert. But anyhow, I digress. But my point being is that lyrically, Gabriel's very unique as well. I think Paul Simon, we talked about Graceland, and Paul started getting into that African rhythm, and Gabriel incorporated that. But even before he was doing any of that stuff, he was already experimenting with some really crazy time signatures and all that kind of stuff, And he wasn't writing about, he was writing about some pretty crazy stuff. I mean, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, all kidding aside, I mean, that was a pretty dense album lyrically and everything like that. But I think in some ways he learned from that he could still write some dense material, but it was a little more accessible. You know what I mean? It wasn't so, some of it was. I mean, there's obviously other stuff that's just whatever.
Graceland actually came out three months after So, just to give you a heads up there. I looked it up
Really?
while we were
Okay.
talking.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
so
So I'm wondering who inspired the other one.
well, obviously So was, his previous album was 82, so I'm guessing he was writing it the whole time. So Gabriel was probably
Uh,
the one that had all the stuff written before
Yeah.
Paul Simon, I would assume. So
Yeah.
because his did come out 3 months before it, but I'm sure Paul Simon's was already in the process of recording by the time So came out.
So am I the only one here that thinks that rhythmically those are very similar albums?
Well, they just happen to both hit
So
on
in
that
Graceland,
at the
I think
same
they
time.
are.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So my number one, obviously, if you've been paying attention at home, is none other than So, the biggest album of his catalog and biggest selling album of his career. What can be said? Red Rain, phenomenal, kicks off the album in the kind of style that you need, and it's not really a pop song. It more sounds like more similar to more like a U2 song in a way. Just a great song, Red Rain. And interestingly enough, this album predates U2's biggest album by 1 year. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of similarities if you listen to the U2 album. So just to give you that heads up. So if you look at this album, Graceland, and the U2 album that came out in '87, it's just like a lot of similarities in style.
Joshua Tree?
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Well, the same producer. That's why I tied it in.
Is that
Daniel
Lanois?
Lanois, yeah. So he has the
Lanois?
same producer.
Is it
So
Lanois or Lanois?
that would be
Is
a
it
question for Cretin.
Is it Pert
Daniel
or Peart?
Lanois.
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 French.
Sounds
Okay.
like a French dish with snails. Lanois.
All right, so real quick before we finish up here, because I know Davey's itching to get his number one in there. Tom, you made a great point. Sledgehammer played the death. It's a song you can. When everybody started going nuts for it, I was one sitting down for it. I'm sure David was the same way. Um, it was okay. It was good to hear something refresh at that point because we were hearing all new material. But I think the highlight of that show for me, without a doubt, was Red Rain and In Your Eyes, which are the two songs that I like the best on this album, anyways. Big Time was okay. I mean, I had no problem with Big Time. I know you guys kind of ragged on it a little bit. I don't hear it a lot, so to me, it wasn't as bad. I think Gabriel gets into it. He really showed a zest when he was singing it. I thought it was, he really seems to like that song. Because I remember seeing him in 2012 when he was doing the same thing. He was like out in front of the stage, dancing along there and enjoying himself immensely, surprisingly. Um, that voice again, I think Tom mentioned that's another great song that doesn't really get a lot of mention on this album because it kind of hides between the hits there. But to me, it's his most consistent, most solid album. You know, I hate to be the one because if you look at my other rankings, I'm usually not. My number one usually isn't the most popular or best selling album. It's usually the one I really like the best, and this one just happens to be it. Unfortunately, doesn't happen a lot with my catalog liking. I usually like the one that I like for a reason. This one just happened to be his biggest seller and his best known album. So that's what I got. Number one. So take it away, Davey. Let's close her out here.
Thank you. My number one is different from everyone else's. This is the album that I've played the most out of Peter Gabriel's catalog. And I think it has a lot to do with the producer. My favorite album is his debut, simply called Car or just Peter Gabriel 1, whichever way you want to go, from 1977. It hit number 7 in the UK, number 38 here, like Joey said earlier, certified gold in both countries, England and America. And Bob Ezrin's the producer on this album, which was mentioned earlier. And he's one of my favorite producers. He produced a lot of the early Alice Cooper stuff from the 70s. He produced In the Spirit of Things by Kansas, which is a really good album, I think underrated in that catalog. The album Smile by the Jayhawks, great pop rock record. Also a bunch of Kiss albums that are 3 out of my 4 favorite Kiss albums. Pink Floyd, Trevor Rabin's Can't Look Away. Great album.
I was going to mention that one. Good job.
I love that record. I like that.
Love that record too.
Big Generator. I think it's better than Big Generator. Maybe not as good as 90125, but definitely better than Big Generator and Onion, as Rick Wakeman would say. But we'll save that for another show. Okay, guitar players on this record: the great Robert Fripp, that everyone loves, especially David, Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner, who were also Ezrin's go-to studio guys, Levin on bass, Alan Schwartzberg, a name you don't hear that often, who was another guy in Ezrin's stable of studio musicians. He played with Kiss, played with Jimi Hendrix, actually, Alice Cooper, Joey's favorite, Yoko Ono, and Rod Stewart. Also Larry Fast from the instrumental prog band Synergy on synthesizers. And I just love every song on this record. I think the production is great. The way it sounds totally different from Genesis. He went in a more, even though it wasn't called this at the time, college radio, alternative, maybe post-punk, that it sounds nothing like The Lamb to me. And I just love every song on here. Moribund the Burgermeister, the aforementioned Salisbury Hill, Modern Love, someone mentioned. I really love Excuse Me. It's just so different. The Barbershop Quartet, led by Tony Levin, who also sings great backing vocals. And then Here Comes the Flood. It's just an amazing way to end the album. Such an uplifting, great song. I once saw the former Spock's Beard singer and drummer, Nick DiVirgilio. He did a solo show at the Bottom Line, I think, in Manhattan. So this was quite a while ago, and that place was still open. And I'm pretty sure he ended his show. I think it was the last song. He came out on a piano, much like you said Gabriel did, and he did a solo version of Here Comes the Flood, and it was just incredible. It's just such an emotionally powerful song. Amazing way to end the record. And that's the one, in all the years working at record stores, I always played the first album the most. So that's why it's my favorite. Great album, Car, my number one to finish it off.
All right. Any last second thoughts, anybody, on this ranking of Mr. Peter Gabriel?
No, one album I was going to mention was his Passion album, which is the soundtrack to Martin Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ. I think it's an instrumental record, but I think it's, of the instrumental records he's done, it's my favorite. There's a lot of really moving material on there.
And I am a lover of this record. Peter Gabriel Plays Live.
Live.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's almost as good as this record behind it, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
Almost as good or just as good?
Oh, goodness.
All right. Plays Live. Yeah, I got to get a copy of that one. I don't.
Oh, you really do. You really do. You know what? Man, like any live release he put out was phenomenal. Just great stuff. This, for the thing about Plays Live, is it's definitely a raw version, raw approach to a lot of the songs. So I really love this record.